Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you all so much for joining us for day 2 of the EHS Leaders Technology Week. We have another great session in store for you today. Insights Revealed, Inside Cority's State of EHS plus Technology Report. Today's session is sponsored by our friends from Cority. Cority is a leading global enterprise environmental health and safety software provider, creating industry-leading technology to empower those who transform the way the world works. For over 35 years, Cority has been powered by the spirit of innovation, deep domain expertise, and a commitment to integrity that enables higher levels of operational and sustainable performance with the most comprehensive, human-centered, and secure SaaS platform to help workers and businesses thrive in 100 countries around the world. The company enjoys the highest levels of client satisfaction and has received many awards for its strong employee culture and outstanding business performance. You can learn more by visiting www.cority.com, or you can visit the resource widget on your screen for more information. And don't forget to check out some of the great free resources provided to you by Cority in this resource widget, including a link to the research that today's session is based on. You don't want to miss out on that great content, so definitely check those out. All right, everyone, before we dive into our session today, I do want to cover some housekeeping items to get you familiar with our session console. There is a widget on your screen called the Media Player widget, and this is where you can control the volume of today's presentation. Please note that there is no dial-in number for our attendees, and the audio is streaming directly from your computer speakers, so be sure they're turned up and on. You don't want to miss any part of today's session. However, if you miss any part of our session today, we are recording it, and we'll be sending a copy of the recording to you via email in about 24 hours. And if anyone on the line today experiences any type of technical difficulty, please feel free to let me know the issue that you're experiencing by hopping on into the Q&A widget, and I'll be happy to assist you today. And speaking of that Q&A widget, we're really excited to hear from you today, and we would love to see your questions on today's topic. We'll get to as many as we can at the end of our presentation during our live Q&A. So if anything comes to mind at all during our session, go ahead and pop your question into the Q&A box, and we'll get to them at the end. All right, everyone, with housekeeping out of the way, let's dive into introductions. Please join me in welcoming our 2 guest speakers to the floor. Here with us today, we have Sean Baldry, Senior Director of Product Marketing at Cority, and Carrie Young, Vice President of Strategic Solutions, also at Cority. If you wish to learn more about our guest speakers, you can hop on into the speaker bio widget on the right-hand side of your screen for information. And with that, Carrie and Sean, over to you to get our session started.
Well, thanks, Michelle, and good afternoon, everyone. Realize everyone's lives are busy. There's a lot going on within the industry right now, so we do appreciate you taking 60 minutes out of your day to spend a little bit of time with us. We hope that the material that we'll be covering today, you'll find useful and you'll be able to use in your work lives. So with that, we wanted to guide this audience through a conversation today about technology. Now, if you ask any EHS professional, they would likely tell you that they couldn't do their job without technology. And I'm saying that not as a plug for software, but simply as a reflection of reality. Organizations today are more global than ever, workforces are more diverse, operations and the inherent risks within those operations are more complex and nuanced and tightly coupled than at any time previously. And I think it's fair to say that technology is now table stakes. It's considered by many EHS professionals to really be their baseline operating infrastructure. And the market evidence that we have really proves this out. So when we look at the global software market, we see that that market is estimated to be between $4 and $5 billion USD and growing. 70 to 75% of large enterprise organizations reported using some type of commercial software or software application, I should say, in 2025. And while it's estimated that software accounts for about 3 to 7% of total EHS spend globally each year, some sources are now forecasting that that total spend is set to increase by anywhere between 10 to 15% over the next 12 months. So technology investments in EHS are growing at a rapid pace. I think all the evidence that we see here at Cority were to suggest that that is true. But we're also seeing factors dictating what EHS professionals are expecting from technology and how they're expecting those software applications and those technologies to really help them solve some of the most urgent challenges that they're facing today. we see across the board companies are facing changing regulatory environments. We're seeing new threats like psychosocial risk and PFAS, as an example, are now entering our lexicon. And stakeholders are pushing for stronger performance in a lot of very nuanced areas, including things like SIF prevention. And what that means is that firms are looking to technology to help them unlock and get ahead and arguably to stay ahead on some of these issues. So considering these factors, earlier this year, our organization partnered with an independent research firm known as Census-Wide, and we surveyed 2,000 senior level EHS professionals across the United States, Canada, the United Kingdom, and Ireland to help us better understand the state of technology in EHS today. And through the survey, we were really looking to answer 3 questions. First, we wanted to know where organizations were today with respect to EHS technology and what role they saw it playing in advancing their EHS program maturity and their overall performance within their business. Secondly, we wanted to understand what key factors or trends were exerting the strongest influence on technology investments and why they were exerting that influence. And lastly, we wanted to understand what the best organizations, and when I say best, I use that term loosely, but probably a more accurate word would be what the most mature organizations. So those organizations that are much more mature in their EHS culture and their EHS programs, what are they doing with respect to technology that's allowing them to outperform their peers, or certainly outperform the benchmark that we see within the industry? So these insights, all the insights that we acquired through the survey, we distilled them into Cority's inaugural State of EHS Plus Technology report, which I'm showing a visual of the right of the screen. So over the next hour or so, we would like to share a little bit about what we've learned from the study and to talk about what those insights are and what they may mean to you. Now, just to be fair to everyone, we're not going to go through every single thing in the report. The report is quite wide. We'll talk a little bit later on in the presentation about how you can access the report on your own, but we're just going to give you a little bit of insight and a thin slice of what we found most interesting from the folks that we had spoken to. So with that, before we dive into the report, we thought it best to provide a little bit of context on how the survey was specifically designed. So as I had mentioned, we surveyed approximately 2,000 EHS professionals across a number of countries and a number of industries, and we assessed them based on a 25-point survey using Cority's EHS technology maturity model. Now, the maturity model is a benchmarking framework that's designed to help organizations gauge where they currently sit with respect to their EHS program maturity, while simultaneously giving them a little bit of a guide to help them chart future progression. So how can I move from where I am today to the upper parts of the curve that would be indicative of a much more mature and progressive EHS organization? And participants were assessed across 4 dimensions, which I'm showing here on the screen on your left, as well as 5 maturity models. Now, my colleague, Carrie Young, she was heavily involved in this. And Carrie, as I had mentioned, you were heavily involved in the development of the model. I was wondering if you could provide the audience with a little bit of perspective of how specifically the model was created, what do the dimensions mean, and how are they selected, and how do those dimensions interrelate?
Sure, Sean, thank you. So our maturity model is new, but maturity models in general are not a new thing. Often they're just focused on technology. We've combined the essential capabilities of leadership and culture, as well as the progression of your process definition, data ownership and governance, along with technology. So some additional capabilities other than just technology. We've also defined the AI component at different levels of maturity. So modernizing a maturity model for today's needs and making sure companies understand the elements it takes to deploy a sustainable AI strategy. All of these capabilities are necessary for sustained change and obtaining the outcomes that you're looking for from a business transformation project. Like he said, it has 5 levels of maturity, fully defining what each looks like to help companies assess where they are today and just how far they want to get in the short-term and mid-term horizons. It may not be realistic to be fully converged with all EHS Plus workflows in the short term, but incremental process is what's going to allow us to get there.
Well, thanks, Carrie. I guess just a follow-up question on that. So obviously you'd made mention that maturity models are not a thing that's new within industry. I think a lot of people on the call would have come by them at some point within their career. And on the flip side, we also see technology maturity models. Can you talk about a little bit of the thesis or the strategy that Cority tried to apply in meshing those two things together that can be quite distinct?
Sure, yeah. So the important thing here is when you're going through a change management process, there's a lot of different elements to make sure that you're successful. And so we really need to assess every one of those elements or capabilities to make sure that we're bringing the entire organization along with us. And so you can't just look at technology in isolation. You need to assess where you are. There's the garbage in, garbage out. So your process needs to be very well developed. You don't want to enable a bad process. You need leaders to be engaged. You need a culture that supports your leaders being engaged as well as supports everybody else using the new change that you're implementing. So again, you can't look at this in isolation. And then, as we all know, AI is something that everybody's asking for. You also can't look at AI in isolation. That it is one of the capabilities that you have to have and integrate into the full strategy.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I think, a lot of organizations are looking at maturing their business and their business processes in a number of different ways, but they don't quite understand the role that technology can and should play within that, and not to rely on technology as being a panacea. I think the only thing that I'll add to what Carrie is saying is it's important to note there's no right or wrong position to end up on this maturity model or any maturity model for that point. The maturity model and where an organization will find themselves is really just that. It defines the starting point, and it's going to be dependent on their priorities, their needs, their resources, and arguably where they'd like to go. So as we go through this, just bear that in mind that we're utilizing the model to plot where organizations fall, and then to give them a little bit of direction as to where they can go next, with that overall goal of becoming more progressive and having a more engaged culture that's going to take them further along their success route. So with that, we thought it's best, let's pivot a little bit. Let's get away from the maturity model per se. And what we'd like to do now is just talk about some of the insights, certainly not all, but some of the insights that we found most interesting when we went through this survey. And the first insight is what we're calling teams are lost in the weeds and AI is offering a way out. So as far as insights go, this shouldn't be surprising to anyone. In the survey, we asked a number of respondents to identify what barriers were limiting their ability to achieve their EHS objectives. And here's what they said. So 1 in 4 stated that they struggle to get frontline staff actively participating in EHS activities. And that's everything from submitting incident reports to closing out assignments or actions that are assigned to them. Another quarter of respondents said they struggle with work being done consistently across different sites and different teams, which often leads to a lot of variable outcomes and, in the worst case, a lot of uncontrolled risk. And we're also seeing 1 in 3 stating that their processes are just far too manual, they're far too complex, and they're far too time intensive, which obviously creates a lot of concerns, least of which being that they can't get their people from out behind a desk and out into the field where the action is. And to make matters worse, when we asked that same group of respondents how their organizations prioritize their EHS activities, we were shocked a little bit to find out that almost 60% had indicated that EHS prioritization was either haphazardly determined or it was done completely reactively. So, sitting on these results, what we learned, I think, was relatively simple. What organizations were saying was that they were struggling to improve EHS performance because their people are bogged down in too much paperwork, which is preventing them from getting out into the field. But even when they were able to get these people out into the field, what they were telling us is that they often lacked data to determine what's priority. They often lacked insights to help those individuals in the field address what they find. And they often lack tools to allow them to easily report back to the business what's happening. So, in this context, it's no wonder that a lot of organizations that are constrained with budgets and they're constrained with resources are now looking toward AI. And we're seeing demand for AI exploding as they're looking for ways to offset those resource challenges and to surface insights more easily to their people out in the field so they can make better decisions in the moment. So Carrie, I'm going to flip back to you. Through the survey, there was obviously a massive amount of interest. What we heard was a massive amount of interest in applying AI for EHS. What specific insights struck out for you?
Yeah, I would say as an industry, we've always been focused on incident prevention, whether that be for safety incidents, quality operational, or environmental scenarios. So it really wasn't very surprising that many of the AI use cases that are in high demand are around trying to identify potential risk and even predict future incidents. And so I think that's not surprising, but I think it's going to get easier with AI because we're going to be proactively mining the existing data to suggest a path forward. So this is now going to be possible. That could be something as simple as categorizing a finding into a certain risk category to help prioritize, or preventing action, or providing the best possible corrective action based on previous actions' effectiveness. So our ability to predict and mitigate is going to increase exponentially. And I think that if you look at this graphic, you can see there's a lot of similar type use cases. So one thing to think about with your AI strategy is how you're going to apply AI across your EHS workflows, and consider what are the principal use cases your organization is going to have, and then start to figure out if there's some overlap. You're going to look for AI that's adaptable enough that it can be used across many different use cases. So don't go out and just build or buy disparate AI agents to accommodate individual use cases. Look for the commonalities across those use cases and see if you can apply similar agents. But I think I guess the biggest surprise is just the number of use cases that we saw provided, but a lot of them focused on that preventative piece of it.
Yeah, I would entirely agree. I think, we're not for want of the ways in which we believe that AI can support EHS. One of the things, so obviously not represented here on the screen, but one of the things that I found most interesting in the report was there was a statement, and I don't know who we can exactly attribute it to, but the statement was something to the effect of, where we see the biggest benefit for AI is in the quote next 10 minutes. And it was really kind of associated around how we can inform, how we can leverage AI to inform what people do next. So can you unload that a little bit for the audience? You read the same section of the report as I did. So what did you take away from that point?
Yeah, I mean, we now have the ability to give people tools to do their jobs better and react quickly to what's happening at the present. So we need to leverage that to help them make the right decisions every single time they're out there in the field. So that is, again, what people are focused on, is those good decisions in the moment, not just this look back of how we performed. I think that's going to be huge for our industry in general.
Yeah, I would tend to agree. And I think that was borne out in some of the feedback that we had received from respondents in the report, is really looking at how AI is going to help. So if a work team is in the midst of a task and something changes, so there's production pressure, or there's an unexplained downtime event, or there's a weather change. Now, often when we think about risk mitigation in the field, those are the things that disrupt. And I think a lot of organizations are rightfully looking at AI and saying, hey, we think that there's an opportunity here for AI to inform those decisions when kind of the way that work is thought to be done. So the way that we're planning it and the way that it's actually executed, a lot of potential benefit there that I'm sure a lot of organizations are interested in exploring. Okay, so that was insight number one. Teams are lost in the weeds and AI is offering a way out. So, we can see that rising workloads and diminishing resources, or in that environment of rising workloads and diminishing resources, more EHS teams are turning to AI for help. And that really brings us to insight number two. And in insight number two is that everyone is using AI, but almost no one trusts it enough to scale it across their business. So this is an interesting point. So let me unpack it for a bit. So while virtually every EHS professional we spoke to admits that their teams are using AI, most of that AI use is what we call shadow AI. So in other words, they're using AI tools that sit outside of approved systems or approved governance structures. And if you reflect on your own business, you might be in this boat. Your teams might be using AI, but it's not approved AI, or it's not AI that's embedded within EHS workflows. It's sitting outside of that. So these are unsanctioned, potentially unsanctioned instances of ChatGPT or Google Gemini or Claude. And we're using that outside of EHS workflows to complete specific tasks. And at the same time, while organizations have trialed, a lot of organizations have trialed approved enterprise AI tools in the past, the data that we see suggests that those experiments are often short-lived and they're often not fully deployed. And when we asked respondents to explain why they were struggling to scale AI, they told us a few things, and I just wanted to share those with you. So first, many of them stated that they lacked leadership commitment to AI strategy. Now, given the buzz that we hear around AI right now, I'm going to be honest, this one was pretty surprising. But what the data suggests is that while many EHS teams are unable to get their senior leaders and their legal departments on board with their AI strategy, it's not like they're setting it aside. They're not stopping, they're just pivoting. And they're pivoting from those enterprise AI tools for EHS to using more free or quote unquote unapproved ones that will help them address some of their workload challenges. And that in turn is adding some benefit, but it's also introducing risk. And that could be risk from data security issues. It could be risk from AI observability. It could be a number of different things. Secondly, many of the respondents that we spoke to stated that without that clear AI strategy, AI adoption tends to be, it tends to take on more of a piecemeal type of approach where different work teams across the business are adopting different AI tools across different solutions, which really makes scaling any of those solutions across the organization much more difficult because we're dealing with different applications that have different user experiences, security protocols, and governance tools. And then finally, enterprise AI often fails to get off the ground in a lot of these businesses simply due to the fact that EHS professionals don't trust it. So here's the idea. While AI offers a big potential, many EHS teams are hesitant to use it since they fear AI bias. They fear AI errors and hallucinations that could impact those life or death decisions that are typically found within EHS circles. And I think we all can probably scrape our minds and come up with something that we've heard somewhere where AI, a team utilizes AI to do something, the AI hallucinates, and there's some sort of negative effect. And we look at that and we think, well, those negative effects could certainly be compounded considering the nature of the work that we do within EHS. So a lot of EHS professionals don't trust the AI, so they're hesitant in deploying it within their EHS workflows. But again, they don't stop. They just pivot to something that's more off book. It's not embedded in their EHS workflows, which means they're not getting full value out of it, and they're really getting those edge cases, really focusing their AI use on edge cases that can offer efficiency, but it's not really getting to the full potential that AI can bring. So I'm going to pause there. Carrie, I want to flip it back to you. So this point brings up another great question, I think. In thinking about it, what first steps would you say an organization should take that would help them begin to pivot from that unsanctioned AI use that we see, pretty much paramount across the industry right now, to more enterprise AI solutions that are designed for EHS? Where should they start, and what should they consider?
Yeah, so as a software provider, we're seeing a lot of our customers start to form these AI teams that are coming up with a strategy and consequences and options for AI for their company. And it's great to have that focus and expertise looking at strategy early. But what we're also seeing is that sometimes that group is not connected to the data privacy or IT group within the organization. So my suggestion is to pull those teams together so that you have that whole perspective from both teams together, and that you're using their guidance basically to evaluate and determine what your strategy looks like. So that's the first thing. And then from there, I just go back to making sure that you recognize all the use cases and try to apply similar AI agents across those use cases. What I see happening is, Sean, to your second point there, it's just like 20 years ago when people were going off and buying different disparate EHS solutions. There's an opportunity here to consolidate your AI solution rather than going out and doing this disparate strategy. And I think if we get ahead of that, it's going to help years down the road on making sure that your AI is feeding you the best possible recommendations across your organization.
Yeah, Carrie, I would tend to agree. I guess just a follow-up to that, and you may not know, and that's totally fine, but I'm always interested, do you think that there's a tipping point out there? Like, do you think there will be a point where the industry tips and we get over that hump and you see more organizations pivoting away from this off-book AI to something that's more purpose-built for EHS? And if so, what do you think that tipping point might be?
Oh yeah, it's just, yes. I think that the organizations, it just takes time for them to move, right? So it's just getting those parts of your organization aligned. It just takes time. AI has just come out and it's just ahead of us right now. So the tipping point, I don't know that it's a thing. It's more about just time. We just need time to pull our strategy together and figure it out, and then deploy it across our organization, just like you would any other project, right? It's change management. It's having guidelines. It's providing those operating procedures for how to work. So it's just going to take the same amount of time it takes other initiatives within our organizations to take hold.
Yeah, fair point. Okay, well, let's move along, and let's move to insight number 3. So I think it's fair to say up to this point, we've seen that organizations are looking for ways to deploy their resources more effectively to drive EHS improvement. So at the top end, we heard that, a lot of EHS professionals are putting a lot of systems, a lot of procedures in place, and they're getting variable results from that. And to that same point, they're not seeing the level of engagement that we see through a lot of different maturity models that is almost a requisite to moving to much more advanced performance. And yet many of these organizations are reluctant. So first of all, they see that performance improvement and they see AI as a lever to do that. But a lot of these organizations are reluctant to adopt those enterprise AI solutions at scale, as we have just discussed, because they don't trust them. And that really brings us to point number 3, that while expertise and oversight matters in EHS, it might matter even that much more in AI. So let me unpack this a little bit. So when we think about AI, I think we often create an image in our minds of a self-aware machine that's, it's assessing their environment and it's utilizing the information that it's acquiring to run transactions, run processes, and then pursue actions, often without human involvement. I think when we think about AI, like that's the mental image that immediately conjures up. And this is what, this description is what we would generically call agentic AI. So autonomous AI systems that are really designed to complete complex, multi-step, and often long-term actions or objectives with little or no human supervision. And when we think about it, that's a novel idea, right? That, let the AI take away the repetitive, the tedious number crunching types of activities that allow the EHS professional to give them time back so they can get out into the field where, I always say where the action is. The trouble with that is that agentic is just not that popular with EHS professionals. And when we ran our survey, one of the things that we had discovered quite quickly was the strong sentiments that EHS professionals had when it came down to agentic AI. So less than 50% of respondents that we spoke to said that they would trust agentic AI to make or act on their own decisions in EHS. And this is, when you kind of think about it, this makes a lot of sense when you consider the risk of bad AI outputs and what effect that those bad AI outputs can have on workplace health and safety. It's not at all surprising that EHS professionals are a little cool to the idea, and that they want AI to make their lives easier, but they just don't want to see full autonomy to it. And this sentiment really reveals how EHS professionals are evaluating enterprise AI options and how they're looking to deploy AI in whatever capacity within their environments. And when selecting AI, what we heard from EHS experts that we spoke to through the survey was they're placing a premium on specific things. And let me just walk through a short list of some of the things that they said. So when they're looking at AI tools, they are balancing a number of interests. One of those interests is data security and privacy protection. So specifically, how well is sensitive data protected when that AI is used? How do we know that our data is not going to go to train the model and PII, so personally identifiable information or personal health information, is revealed when it shouldn't be? How well does AI scale across different sites and regions? So how easy is it, once it's in place, for you to expand the use of those AI tools and those AI agents as your business grows and develops? A lot of EHS professionals are looking at transparency and explainability of AI outputs. When we consider the risk that bad AI outputs can have in our business, what that translates to is a lot of EHS professionals saying, I might want to rely on AI, but I want to have a paper trail. I want to have an audit trail that I can go back to and not only understand when that output was processed, but show me how the AI arrived at the output that it did. So give me accessibility to information to help me understand how that AI arrived at that output. What were the data? What was the data that it was looking at? What were the prompts or instructions that it was considering? What were some of the other features that were at play that allowed the AI to arrive at the decision that it did? Interestingly, one of the things that they're looking at is vendor expertise in that EHS domain. And this is particularly interesting, right? Because we know that AI only functions as well as the data that's within it, the models that it's using to crunch that data, and the input, the prompts or the instructions that we provide. So providing an instruction to do something gets better when the individual or the prompt has an understanding of context. It understands how work in EHS is done. And not every organization and not every AI model is equivalent in that respect. So a lot of EHS professionals are certainly putting a premium on vendor expertise and how that is built within the AI tools that they're looking at. And then finally, human oversight and control. And this is really, I don't want to say the most important one, but certainly one of the highest sought after features is to what degree are those AI outputs vetted by real people? We heard previously that EHS professionals don't like the idea of agentic AI. They don't like the idea of turning it on and forgetting it. So they want the AI to process certain things, but how does that AI get vetted and reviewed by a person who is that last line of defense and has that last degree of control in that approach? So a number of different things, probably certainly not all of them. Carrie, I'm really interested in your insight here. What does this mean for you when we think about all this stuff? What do you think this means in terms of how AI systems should be designed and what EHS professionals should be thinking about when they're evaluating their AI options?
Yeah, there's two things, and you said the first one, Sean, that an EHS person, there's a lot of different regulations, complex regulations at the regional, state, federal level, some of them that contradict each other. So complex regulations, you have complex operating scenarios within your operations that are hard to model. The decisions that we're making, the things that we're doing affect the well-being of our fellow employees. And so this all makes trusting AI very hard for us. And so the two things, you want to make sure that you have the ability to change the prompts or refine the prompts as an EHS expert to make sure that your prompts are working well, and then also the ability to review the output from the AI tool itself. And so that's really important. And then the second thing is just making sure that your organization is being guided through a centralized team with respect to the goals, the security standards, and the technology roadmap that you're putting in place at your company. So those are the two things I would say that are extremely important when selecting AI, is making sure that you have the ability to prompt and stay in control of what comes out before it's acted upon, and then also just making sure that you're building that centralized group to control what you're purchasing.
Yeah, I think those are all very informed viewpoints, and that actually, incidentally, it provides me a perfect segue into insight number 4. So let's go there now. And what insight number 4? So I think at this point, we've learned that EHS professionals want to adopt AI, but there are some prerequisites that have to exist within their business before they're willing to take that next step. And this kind of allows us to arrive at insight number 4. As companies are racing to apply AI in various different ways within their EHS programs, our survey data is suggesting that while less mature firms are really focused on deploying AI agents and really trying to understand what AI tools are available for their particular use cases, what we're seeing from organizations at the top end of the maturity model, so those that are much more advanced, and we would certainly say leading in their sectors, is that those organizations aren't thinking about AI agents or AI use cases per se. They're thinking more about consolidation. And that's because these mature firms know that, something that their less mature firm, peers don't, is that trying to apply AI on top of fragmented technology architecture, a very kind of fragmented data foundation isn't very tenable. Carrie, help us understand why system fragmentation is such a barrier to scaling AI.
Yeah, so your AI needs to have the full picture, all the context of everything that's going on. And if you look at EHS workflows, not only is the data shared, so think chemical data or asset hierarchies or people information. So we've historically defined master data and made sure that that master data was shared at least or integrated. But also the workflows themselves are also overlapping. So it's not just the data set, it's the progression of the workflow. So if I'm a nurse seeing a patient that's been injured as a result of an incident, as I'm going through my case information, I also want the ability to see all of that incident data so that I can do my job effectively. Or if I'm calculating air emissions for regulatory reporting, I also know that that data is going to have to be part of my sustainability report. So if all of this data lives in the same place, AI is going to be able to use the context from all of the workflows and make an informed recommendation or path forward. And without this cohesive source of data, parts of the story are missing, and you're going to get less than optimal recommendations from the AI. So now more than ever, it's extremely important that these data sets and workflows come together.
Yeah, I would entirely agree. And I think that's a massive point that can't be understated. But fortunately, I think we're seeing a lot of organizations starting to recognize that. And what's interesting is in our survey, about 85% of the respondents said that they were working for companies that still, that they were often relying on a lot of multiple disparate, disconnected systems, or some systems that were partially integrated but not fully integrated. But that appears to be shifting, and we're now seeing not only AI exerting a massive influence on technology purchasing decisions, where we see in the figure that I'm showing on the screen, 94% of organizations now say that AI is influencing how they're purchasing EHS technology, but almost, I would say even more interestingly, is that 2/3 of those organizations are saying that they're now focusing on consolidating their solutions onto fewer platforms that help them converge those systems, converge those processes, converge that data to not only power those AI use cases, but to help them standardize AI security and governance structures, to help them commonize user experiences that will make AI and certainly everything that they do, much faster and much more sustainable. So, for the audience here today, these are 4 insights. There's certainly more that came out of the report, but given the time that we have today, we just wanted to give you a little bit of sense of what we saw, but we wanted to now pivot to address the final question that I had mentioned at the top end of today's session. And that question that we were saying at the outset was, we had mentioned that we had that one of the goals of our survey was to better understand what organizations who sit higher in the technology maturity model, what do they do that allow them to outperform their peers in EHS? And from the survey, what we did is we created what we're calling an outperformers playbook. And we just wanted to take the final few moments in the time that we had today to call out a couple of those highlights and to talk a little bit about what we learned from these high-performing organizations. So, we've isolated the things, from these outperformers that position them for success. And for the sake of simplicity, we've narrowed them down to 4 things. So the first thing that we see from outperformers is that they're focused on not only engaging their front lines, but engaging their leadership. And these companies not only recognize the benefits of strong engagement and ownership, but they actively work to create change agents within their business. And that helps them drive internal ownership and accountability for each programs, which in turn helps them realize much more sustainable EHS performance improvement. And it's probably no wonder then that we see that outperformers, or those that would fit within the higher stages of the maturity model, tend to be 3 times as likely as their less mature peers to consistently engage their leaders, or have consistently engaged leaders, and are 30% more likely to have engaged front lines. Carrie, how does this reflect your experience with dealing with what we would call top performing organizations?
Yeah, I mean, this is, people don't like change in general. So without the support of leadership, changes often stall or stop completely. The culture of your organization is what sets your leaders on their course. If you value EHS outcomes, you're going to have a leadership culture that encourages continuous improvement of EHS workflows. So it's not surprising that this is something that is first and foremost in what we're looking at here. So it's just very important that outperformers, what we've seen is outperformers have strong leadership.
Yeah, entirely agree. Okay, let's move on to point number 2. So the next thing that we learned from outperformers is that they focus on building strong standardized processes and data practices. And I think this point can't be understated. And we see this, as a software provider, we see this all the time. But many organizations, err because they think that software will solve all of their data problems. And what we typically find is almost the inverse, that software amplifies the data problems that they already have. So in more simple terms, if your data is not structured in a way that allows it to be easily collected and processed and validated and analyzed, adding a software application to that will only reveal those operational weaknesses, and really provides what we tend to see with organizations is we have to shift to ensure that becomes the first point of that change management structure that Carrie was talking about. So with respect to that, we see outperformers focusing a lot more than their less mature peers on building those data structures and strengthening their data practices. And it means that they're 4 times more likely to have centralized trusted data, which is going to be key for every business process that they have, and certainly is going to be particularly important for AI. Carrie, help us understand the differentiated value that centralized data has on EHS performance.
Yeah, sure. So we all know that you can't standardize everything 100%, but there is a lot that can be standardized across industries, geographies, different groups of people. And what you do is you standardize best practices because it's going to give your organization a framework to speak to and operate to. Once everyone's versed in this framework, it makes continuous improvement so much easier. And that's what the best performers are doing, is they're providing their workforce with that framework and best practices to operate well.
Fantastic. Yeah, I would agree. Okay, let's move on. Third, what do outperformers do with respect to modern platforms? Well, they embrace them, recognizing that platforms help them consolidate data, they help remove system fragmentation, they help deliver a more seamless user experience, and as they progress toward AI adoption, it provides a point for that centralized governance. It's not surprising to learn that a lot of mature organizations have started to shift from point solutions to modern EHS platforms, or minimally begun to integrate the platforms that they already have. So they have a free exchange of data that's going to be necessary to power the various tools that they have. And in fact, we see that firms are 3 times, or these much more mature firms, are 3 times more likely to consolidate, and are massively exploring systems integration as an enabler of outsized performance improvement. So Carrie, for a company who's considering a move, so let's say that they're utilizing multiple systems, they are looking, maybe to reduce their software spend, or they want to move much more quickly into AI, and they see reducing their IT tech stack and their IT landscape to fewer platforms, what are the 3 pieces of advice that you could give them so they could start that movement?
Yeah, so what I've often seen is that IT professionals don't understand fully the EHS workflows and the complexity of those workflows. So they often simplify what they think the EHS workflows are. And a lot of the times EHS experts don't understand all the complex technical considerations that you need to account for when you're moving to a new software platform. So number one, you need to take a holistic view, bringing those 2 groups together when evaluating software. So first, does it meet the functional needs of the EHS Plus professional very fully? And is it built on a technology platform that's easy to scale, easy to upgrade, and gives control to those EHS professionals rather than being dependent upon the IT group? So that's first and foremost. Look at that holistically. And then the second thing I've stated already, don't forget that much of the data across these workflows are interrelated. And so identify those relationships early and plan for how they come together to support your decision making. Don't look at those things in isolation. Look at them holistically. Even if it's not something you can tackle immediately, you need to know where those interdependencies are for the future. And lastly, just don't be afraid to get started. Incremental progress is better than no progress at all. So just get started.
Yeah, I think I would probably weave your last point and your first point together, because we often find that obviously EHS and IT groups often have different objectives, and hopefully not, but in some cases those objectives can be conflicting. So for an IT group that's just looking to reduce their overall IT spend, the risk of the EHS professional not getting involved and not helping to dictate that transition is they're often forced to migrate to something that's not fit for purpose. And that's, I'm sure many of us on the call have been in that environment. We know how unpleasant it is. So we don't want to do that. So one of the things that we can do by acting now is being able to kind of identify, like, what are the platforms that we do believe are fit for purpose, but that can also support the consolidation movement that a lot of these IT and technology groups are pushing towards. So that's a great point. Okay. Rounding us out, the 4th point, and probably unsurprisingly, we talked a lot about AI today. And what we find is outperformers prioritize AI strategy. So what this study revealed to us from Cority's standpoint was that outperformers prioritize trust and impact over speed. And this is true for EHS, and it's true for AI. And I think what we found was, while their peers focus on AI tool experimentation, outperformers focus on first building a robust AI strategy with their executives, with their IT teams, with their key stakeholders that will help create that foundation to guide AI investment and ensure that things like governance and human control and AI observability, transparency, explainability, the things that we had talked about before that are really guiding AI and EHS decision-making, technology decision-making, are really brought to the top of the list. And what we find is that these organizations who do that are nearly twice as likely, or I should say mature organizations are twice as likely to have made AI a strategic priority, and they're almost 3 times as likely to have begun embedding enterprise AI across their EHS workflow. So Carrie, I'm going to pause here. Any final thoughts on AI strategy or any other item that we reviewed today?
Yeah, I will just say there's a lot to think about here, and so I'll just leave you with 2 key principles. First, don't try to do everything at once, and what I mean by that is don't try to jump to the highest level maturity overnight, but do consider that all of these capabilities are required for incremental change. So you do need to consider all of these capabilities every single time you even move just a little bit up that maturity curve. And then second, it's the 7 habits thing. It's called begin with the end in mind. So if you can map out where you are today on that maturity curve and where you want to be in the short term, the midterm, and the long term, that is what's going to allow you to create a plan that gets you to where you need to be. But you need to think about that long-term vision as you're making those incremental progress or projects, and then execute on that plan and make sure that you celebrate the successes along the way.
Awesome. Well, I can't think of a better way to tie this one off. So this brings us to the end of our presentation today. So what I would like to do is just leave you with a final few thoughts, and then we'll open it up for Q&A. So first and foremost, there's little dispute, I think, that technology is now considered table stakes in EHS. And as data volumes grow, as the pace of business quickens, as resources remain constrained and hard to come by, EHS professionals will be looking for their next evolution of technology. And right now, though not everything, a lot of signals are pointing to AI as being that crucial element that is going to provide a huge ability to transform EHS practice and how we take that next step forward as a group of peers. But what's interesting is outperformers are showing us that rushing to slap AI tools onto broken, disconnected systems or unscalable platforms is not a really sustainable approach, because it's going to make things harder to inform that AI. It's going to make it harder to adopt the AI in a scalable manner. It's going to make it harder to govern that AI with a degree of credibility and consistency. And these organizations, these mature organizations, know that to get the most out of their AI, they need to do a couple of things first. So first, they need to secure that executive level agreement and sponsorship for EHS improvement. They need to work with those stakeholders to build a strong AI strategy that balances accuracy, scalability, security, and control. They need to right-size their EHS processes and data structures to support that push for AI. And then finally, they need to move toward more connected, more integrated and more consolidated systems that brings their people, their processes, their data, and their AI together. And with that foundation in place, firms would be in a very good position to really start to get the most out of that AI investment, which hopefully will in turn transform their EHS performance. So with that, I'm going to close things down. I'm going to hand the floor back to Michelle, and we can open it up for questions.
All right, Carrie, Sean, amazing. Thank you so much for sharing the insight this afternoon. And folks in the line, just a reminder, if you do wish to download the full report, there is a link in the resource list widget on the left-hand side for you to access. So definitely go in and download that report there. Before we dive into our Q&A, I do just want to note that there is a quick poll up on the screen, and I'll leave this up for the majority of the Q&A. I know we have a few minutes left here. Just a quick yes or no response here. If you would like a Cority expert to reach out to discuss how this applies to your organization, again, you can hit yes or no, and I'll leave this up on the screen for folks while we're diving into Q&A here. All right, so let's see, Sean and Carrie. One of the first questions I'm seeing here is, what is the single biggest shift organizations must make to advance their EHS programs and maturity?
Yeah, I'll take that one, Sean.
Okay.
I think the biggest shift is making sure that you're consolidating these workflows into a single place to allow the AI to have that context and really understand the full picture. So EHS consolidation more than ever is a priority. That's how I'd answer that.
All right, perfect. So let's see here. Another question, how did the insights from the survey change when segmented along different industry sectors?
Ooh, okay, I'll take that one, Carrie, if you don't mind. That is a very interesting question. So when we go back, so I had mentioned previously that we interviewed 2,000 senior level EHS people across 4 different countries, and I think it was across 12 different sectors. So that's everything from oil and gas to manufacturing, energy and utilities, healthcare, pharma, you name it. I will say that our team is processing that information and taking the insights that we've provided in the standard report, and I believe that we're going to provide some additional details on how those insights reflect on a segmented basis. So more to that, if you go to www.cority.com, you'll find more shortly on that point. But I would say when I was looking at that, I would say there wasn't a lot of variability. So a lot of the insights that we did see hold true in a number of different segments. I would say that on a general perspective, they may change depending on risk category. They may change depending on regulatory environment. So, and it may change just based on the nature and maturity of the industry as a whole. So as an example, we tend to see that regulation and operational risk profiles tend to push different industries to adopt different standards of practice. So in aviation, as an example, or within oil and gas, we tend to see comparatively a high level of EHS maturity, as well as in healthcare. So we may see a different distribution of some of these insights in those segments where more of those organizations would be higher up on the curve relative to their peers in other industry segments. That's probably the most I can provide right now. But I would say where I was expecting a lot of pretty significant change, we saw a lot of the insights being the same. So I think a lot of organizations, when you consider resource constraints, when you consider budgets, everybody's kind of in the same boat, or they're being asked to do more with less, which is really kind of surfacing the importance of AI. And I think in that case, we're also seeing a lot of organizations moving toward how do we get better data structures? How do we commonize and standardize our processes? How do we get our systems consolidated that's going to give us a proper foundation to explore AI a little bit more meaningfully? We see that generally across the board. However, there's obviously going to be nuances with certain industries being a little bit more advanced than others.
Thanks, Sean, for that response. We have a couple more questions that have been coming in. Before I dive in, just a reminder to folks, there is that poll up on your screen. If you can just submit yes or no there, we'd love to see your insight there. Another question that just came through is, how do you balance the shift of AI with the fear that a lot of people are having in regards to being replaced by AI that they're probably training right now?
That is a fantastic question. I'm gonna try this one, Carrie, and feel free to jump in after. Yeah, it's obviously a consideration, right? Because there's this, it feels like it's a double-edged sword between everybody's interested in AI, but they're worried about AI replacing them. I think that is a very relevant statement across industries. It's probably within EHS, it's unique though. And I think it calls back to what I was saying previously, that the difference is there is a lot of embedded expertise within EHS professionals, things that we know, like how to operate, and it will take time. And I don't know if AI will ever get to a point where they would be able to fully replace that individual. So when I'll speak to Cority as an organization, we see AI as being an enabler of those EHS professionals, not a substitute for those professionals. So what we're hoping AI will do is to make it easier for them to scour their information and to be able to surface things. Because as we had learned from some of the respondents, their challenge was, I want to get my people out in the field, but they're blocked. And when they're out in the field, I want them to focus on the things that are most important. Having worked previously in the industry myself, I know that often crunching data would take days to actually surface an insight to then get somebody out to do that. So what we're trying to do with AI, hopefully as an industry, is to be able to, is it for that AI to serve as an assist to that professional, not a replacement for that professional. But certainly, Carrie, feel free to add some color on that.
Yeah, no, I think that's well stated, Sean. I think the only thing I would say is the complexity of the workflows around EHS, as well as the consequences, the severe consequences that are possible, make it much harder to just completely replace the EHS professional. So it's just going to make them sharper, be able to focus on continuous improvement. But absolutely, they need to provide their expertise and apply it to the AI in order for it to be successful.
Wonderful. Thank you both so much for jumping in there. I see we are hitting the top of the hour, actually. We're not getting close. Carrie, Sean, any final comments on your end before we close out of our presentation today?
Carrie?
Just that we appreciate the time today. Thank you.
Yeah, likewise. I would say for everybody that was able to join, more than happy to continue this conversation with you. So we provided our contact information. If you're at all interested, please reach out to us. We'd love to continue this conversation. Obviously, it's a changing environment, and it's probably not the last time that we'll be talking about AI, but certainly love to connect if you're interested.
Wonderful. And thank you both so much for spending the afternoon with us. We appreciate it. And I want to thank each of you in the audience for your engagement, for your time today. And a huge thanks to our session sponsor, Cority, for helping make this event possible. Just a reminder, we did record today's session, So if you wish to preview it again or pass it over to a friend or a colleague, you'll have that recording in hand coming to you via email in about 24 hours, and it's going to be sent to the email that you used to register for this event. So keep your eyes open for that. And one more time, don't forget to check out those great resources in the resource widget provided to you by Cority. There's some great information in there that you don't want to miss out on. All right, everyone, thank you all so much again for joining us for our EHS Technology Week. Thanks to Cority. Thank you to Carrie and Sean. Have a great rest of your afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us.